It's a tricky brand because it's something that people around the world have agreed to wear to show their status. And it's a few tens of thousands of people every year. So it's not like millions or hundreds of thousands or something like that. And it's not something that even kids know from Mumbai to, Montana, and just like Ferrari or whatever else, or Rolex or something like that. No, it's like a very novel niche product purchased by people who want to say that, okay, I've made it and I'm here and I'm rich and whatever. So where do you take that? How do you turn it into something that lives on and lives beyond this craze that's existed for the last number of years?
On this week's show, we ask, have traditional retailers lost their power? Is AI now designing watches and recruiting executives? Is Ariel now living the pit life? Should all watches have a battery? And is Omega's latest novelty deserving of being called luxury? Enjoy the show.
Greetings and welcome to this week's aBlogtoWatch Weekly. The usual gang of suspects are here. Good morning, Ariel. How are you?
I'm good. I just got back to LA last night on a trip where me and some other members of the media, really suffered for the luxury watch industry. Spending a lot of time, traveling. It's hard.
Is there an industry that the consumer has less sympathy for than the journalists that cover wristwatches?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think car journalists are also in the same bracket of, we have no sympathy whatsoever for your suffering covering luxury goods?
I think the car guys have it a little bit better. They get to drive the cars
right, okay.
For the most part. They get a little bit more leeway. And I think it's a lot more clear what they're there for. They're like, okay, I'm here to write about a car. For me, it's very clear with aBlogtoWatch. I'm here to write about a watch. Yes, we talk about the world around watches, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about just like, I don't know, the minutia of fashion in a way that just has nothing to do with just buying cool watches for yourself. So with us, I think sometimes we'll go to an event and a bunch of us will look at each other and be like, oh my God, how do we cover this? Because there's times where there isn't even a watch. I mean, we've all been to watch events. I know David loves these, where there's like no watch. He's like, and there's a look on his face, which is like, it's not exactly like, what am I doing here? But it's like, if only you knew the other things I would rather be doing than being here right now.
They have given Oscars for less. In terms of acting, I have to try really hard.
There was a fairly hysterical story in Watch Pro this week by Robb and Swithenbank. I recommend you go and have a look at that. It kind of reflected on the novelty of turning up to a big exhibition and there basically not being any watches or very few. David, the most ridiculous press event you've ever been to that was for watches that basically involved no watches?
Oh, that's a tough one. Wow. These are all from a previous life. I think, these things peaked in the mid-2010s for me. So 7-8 years ago, I don't know, probably in France, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, playing polo on the back of a horse that I can't ride. And, there's one watch that you can take pictures of for 10 minutes, but it's like a 3-day event. Something like that.
Yes, I don't think we're raising any more sympathy amongst the audience with these stories of quaffing French champagne while riding horses.
Yeah, this is not going to work.
I don't think you're garnering sympathy. Good stuff. Well, lots to cover this week, but we're going to start off, Ariel, with you and your article from the start of the week. Ariel's Thoughts is what it's entitled, and it was your thoughts on how traditional wristwatch retail has lost its power over consumers. So in what way have the retailers lost control?
This was one of many essays I wrote sort of over the last year or so, and we published it a little bit later. I was in this sort of essay writing mode, and I like talking about evolution of little things and how that has big impact, sort of the emergent quality of different things. And I think the premise of this article has to do with how watch retailers were really at the epicenter of convincing people to buy this watch or that watch. People would come in knowing something about watches and basically trusting the retailer to show them what they had and tell them what they wanted in a watch, and they would be educated about technique and craftsmanship. And yeah, some of them would come in knowing this or that. And this is especially before the prevalence of a lot of watch media and a lot of the groups on the internet, where you're really beholden to what they knew and what they told you. And that was both a lot of power for the retailer, but it was also a lot of responsibility for the retailer. They had to know these things. But it came with a lot of power, meaning that they could make a lot of money by selling these things and also earning the trust of the consumer, right? So the consumer sort of had to trust them because they wanted these things, but they didn't really know how to evaluate them. And you flash forward to now where things really couldn't be any different. And that is consumers come in often knowing more than the retailer, knowing what they want. And the relationship with the retailer is very different. And the value that the retailer brings to the space is still there, but is also different. And so I like to discuss this because these small things have immense impacts on which brands do well, what types of watches do well, price points, cities around the world, and things like that. And in an attempt to sort of explain and understand the world of today, I think it's also a very good idea to contrast it with the world of yesterday. And it's not so black and white that none of this exists anymore. There's still plenty of retailers out there that, to a degree, educate the consumer, but the tide has really shifted in a big way, and consumers walk into the store knowing a lot more, having a lot more ideas of what they want, and that has fundamentally changed the watch industry over the last 15 or 20 years.
So how homogeneous is the current experience of watch shopping versus what it would have been 20 years ago? Like 20 years ago, if you went to watch shop in the States versus Germany versus Japan, would there have been a very different way in which you were being marketed to and sold to in an authorized dealer versus today, where my impression is that in the world of corporate sales, everyone's kind of reading the same instruction manual?
It's a good point. It's an interesting question. I would say that things are not consistent at all. I'm not saying that they were ever very consistent, but buying a watch today is one of the least consistent elements of the watch industry. Lots of consistency amongst good design, tons of consistency amongst products that, perform the task of being a watch well, being well made. But when it comes to how the item is sold to the end consumer, it's all over the place. From some seedy little shop that, you're not really sure what's going on and if it's real, to paying, top dollar in a high street store, to buying in person or online, from the brand directly or a third-party authorized dealer, gray market, from an individual who has a used one somewhere. I mean, the variety with which you can buy a luxury timepiece is staggering, is utterly staggering. And in a lot of ways, that's good. But I would say that that's probably the weakest part of the watch industry today. And why I have these discussions in the first place is that no other industry that I sort of know and work with has as inconsistent a process of buying the thing. I mean, buying cars, for example, far fewer options on how to buy cars. I'm not saying there aren't options, but it's considerably more consistent than with wristwatches.
Yeah, I mean, I walk down the Argyle Arcade in Glasgow, which is our kind of famous shopping street for watches, or you walk down New Bond Street in London, you go into the stores and you get a completely different experience depending on which shop you walk into, whether it's a shop owned by a brand, a mono brand owned by a watch retailer, or a multi-brand store. And it is odd that there isn't any consistency. And I don't know to what extent it puts people off because they simply don't know what to expect when they go in. Are they going to get jumped on by people trying to sell them stuff? Are they going to be ignored and only spoken to when they speak? David, what's your watch shopping experience like in your part of Europe? Is it very different from what you experienced traveling the world?
I think, it has come a long way over the last decade. Boutiques are, much more neatly furnished. The staff is, sometimes, oftentimes they remain the same, but obviously, as a result, much more knowledgeable. I think, we don't have too many boutiques here to be representative of what it's like to buy watches in Greater Europe, but I can attest to the fact that here in Budapest, it's, people are super knowledgeable. All these boutiques are buttoned down, so you go there. It's very tidy. You're received well, and I keep hearing from HQ as well that boutiques here are very highly rated, even on a global standard. So I think overall it's pretty good. As far as my personal experiences are concerned, it's difficult because I'm recognized. I've been recognized for a good number of years now. But when it started, I was just getting into watches well over a decade ago, and I remember I went into a boutique just to look at some stuff, and of course, they were kind, and frankly, I expect these boutiques to be kind to absolute novices, because, you will eventually go back 5 or 10 or 20 years later and buy a watch, but the way you are treated and the way you're first exposed to these beautiful products, basically, when it comes to your first hands-on experience, makes a big difference. If you have someone breathing down your neck and just not even want to hand the watch over, that's not great. They should be kind and helpful and open, as long as you're respectful, and thankfully that's the case here, but I'm told it's not the same everywhere to work.
Yeah, I do wonder if it's a city thing and a scale thing as to whether in the likes of Budapest or Glasgow, getting into the watch selling business, working for an AD, is possibly a bit more of a career choice than maybe it is in London or New York, whereby what you're getting into is a sales job, and you'd be happy selling anything, but it just so happens you're selling watches. And I think it becomes a lot more obvious as you walk into various stores. I think, as you say in the article, Ariel, about how much more intelligent the shoppers are than we used to be. Just going in. Christy, who you all know from their podcast and the intros to this podcast, tells a story recently of going into a tag boutique and the person being surprised that she was interested in this bright yellow Formula One watch. And they got into discussion, and the guy who clearly knew a lot about tag had clearly gone and done the course with Tag Heuer and selling tags, was asking her as to what her favourite watch brand was, to which she replied A. Lange & Söhne, to which he replied that he'd never heard of them. So the ability for someone to go and do the training course that allows you to sell one particular brand of watch, but not pick up any general knowledge as to the world of watches in general, seems to be a bit of an indictment over just how educating watch retailers are being in training their staff. You would think well, to be honest, I would think that the 101 of training a member of watch retail should be to listen to a blog to watch weekly and actually pick up some general knowledge. But it just seems to be a very changing and fluid situation that we're in now with retail. I think, as you say, Ariel, there's so many different ways that people are trying to sell watches. It's as if this is a brand new product that somebody just invented, like mobile phones 20 years ago, and they haven't quite figured out how to sell them yet. Is it not a bit odd?
It's weird.
It's not slightly more homogeneous than it is.
I think it's part of the beauty of it. The wristwatch category is its own category, but it doesn't really agree with any other categories. And the way that people appreciate it, to the ways that they're sold, or the way that they're brought to market, there's so much weird variety here that the watch industry really exists in a bunch of industries at the same time. Is it this? Is it closer to this? Is it closer to this? And there's also a lot of different people that want these things for a lot of different reasons, right? So if you're like the type of person that just likes gear, you're like the gear person that just loves the cool car and the cool, outdoor stuff and wants gear, you're like not really looking for a high street experience. You just want the gear. You can buy it on eBay for all you care. Like, the gear is what's important. But let's say you want the watch to make you feel like a big shot. You don't want to just have the gold watch. You want the experience of being seen, getting it, going to the store. Who's watching me? What's the other swag I get? Can I take a selfie of myself at the sitting area? Am I going to drink the champagne? I want my girlfriend's going to go with me. We're going to be able to talk about this. I'm going to bring a friend, my cousin's going to come with. Like, it's this whole thing where it's an experience. It's a memory for them. And then when they wear the watch, they think about it. Man, I felt so good. I felt like such a big shot. I used to walk by stores like that all the time, never being able to afford it. And now I could go in and I just bought myself a watch at retail price, and I was treated so nicely. And like the gear person is like, what? I don't understand what you're talking about. And then if you tell the experienced person, like, just buy something online, they're like, but that for them doesn't sort of like, scratch the itch. And that's just one sort of example of two completely different people ostensibly buying the same thing.
We're going to touch on it shortly with the news coming out of AP this week, who are a brand who are very much going down the selling direct via their own stores. But 10 years from now, Ariel, David, where do you think we are in watch retail? What's changed? Or has nothing changed? Is it actually just going to be the same kind of soup of different ways of retailing things?
There will be movement. We know that. We're starting to see bits and pieces of consolidation. Now, I know people are like, oh, but there's so much activity happening on the internet and there's so many new retailers. And that's true. There's a lot of them. But, you know, some of the more corporate side of things are not really working. You know, the Richemont and LVMH who've invested in these big online retailers, not even related to watches, just luxury items in general. None of them are doing that well. And they're going to start to sort of eat each other up, I'm pretty sure, because it just doesn't make sense. There is a need for sort of high-end department stores online. And so the Mr. Porters of the world and the Neiman Marcuses of the world and all the different flavors of that, they have a very real goal and in use, but they have to assert themselves. Like, I remember the days of the local department store, and these are in large parts ended. You know, in America, there was Nordstrom and Robinson's May and Macy's and Nordstrom, and it's just a whole bunch of them. And here in Los Angeles, these companies would market mercilessly. I mean, mercilessly. Television, print, billboards, constantly through the mail. You would just get just mailers and just spam and just so much stuff. Like, you knew about their sales every time of year. It was just like they just reminded you constantly to buy stuff, and that worked. That worked, but no one would go if it wasn't for just them focusing. You know, they're the anchor at malls, and they made sure there's parking, and they're open late enough. And there's just so much effort to make it convenient for the consumer, to let them know about it, cater to their every need. Are the online retailers doing a lot of this? Some of them think it's very innovative that there's like a live chat. Oh, you can talk to a real person. Well, people are used to that. They've been doing that for generations. What else do you got? And so I think what we're missing is the special way that those retailers online are going to command the attention, let alone the business, of huge amounts of consumers that are going to make a difference. No one's quite sure how to do this. I mean, aBlogtoWatch is probably one of the best places on the internet of getting traffic to an online watch store. And we have a lot of advertisers, and we thank them for allowing our business to run. But the sophistication with which watch retailers, let alone watch brands, use our advertising services is staggeringly shallow given how much it needs to be. What they need to do to succeed in an online e-commerce environment is not what they're doing right now. It requires more investment, a lot more activity, a lot more things that they're doing. And I know it because I've seen it in other worlds of e-commerce and how they get by and how they, again, have to mercilessly market. Still, an idea here that the product would sell itself. You put a lot of effort into the watch and people just magnetize to it. Well, they're starting to realize that old game doesn't work anymore, and you have to just, again, mercilessly market online. So which stores are able to figure out the strategies and the business models to do that will be the winners. We have no idea who they'll be tomorrow because I don't think they exist yet today, at least not in the form.
I think that's a really interesting point you make about the media involvement with proper bricks and mortar retailers, because I think what we've seen due to the lack of joined up thinking in terms of how do you reach your educated audience has actually been one of the drivers behind a number of media companies now selling watches. They were so unable to engage with actually saying, can you just traditionally advertise with us and we'll promote your store selling the watches that we speak about? That so just wasn't happening, that the easiest way for them to develop was to miss out the middleman and just sell the watch themselves and lose, to my belief, a lot of their media credibility. David, do you think there is one big disruptor that could change the whole market? If Rolex tomorrow decided, you know what, we're going to let you sell our watches online, would that just clear the decks and reset the whole shooting match?
It certainly would, but they would need to be able to make 5 million more watches per year before that could happen. Otherwise, it would just be the same long Excel sheet with names on it, just in one place. They could open a Google document and just share it with everybody. Everybody could just enter their name and the watch they want and then just be done with it. That would be Rolex
just see
online.
a global list of where everybody is on the waiting list.
Yes. privacy set to anyone with the link can edit, and they can just go and just rearrange the order of people waiting. For a more serious answer, sure. I mean, like Ariel is saying, it's very shallow. It's been very shallow for now. I don't think that, it's funny because for a lot of these brands, it's strangely and traditionally uncouth to talk about money and spending it. So, the fact that these watches cost.
The Swiss being embarrassed to talk about money, it's just crazy, really.
Is it? Well, yeah. There are a few reasons for that, but we will not get into that. So it's like, so basically, it's still all across this industry, and maybe I can always imagine the fact that they are internally not even able to discuss these things properly. So not being able to communicate it to the outer world is one thing, but not having these discussions internally is another. And sometimes, at some point after a number of years have gone past, you have to ask yourself, like, is this what we're seeing now? Where is that coming from? Why is this the result? How many actions or inactions has it taken for us to be in this situation right now? Why is buying a watch such an unsexy experience? Basically, whether you're online or brick and mortar or whatever it is, it's very ancient, it's very antiquated, and it's not like €100 shoe where you buy it and you try it on and then you send it back if you don't like it. It's like people are probably subconsciously expecting more from this experience and they are not getting it.
This week we have seen the announcement of who is going to take over as CEO at Audemars Piguet. And it is someone that I suspect very few people in the watch industry would have gone, oh, yes, of course, that's an obvious choice.
I have a theory.
You have a theory? Okay, well, tell us your theory. It is Ms. Resta, who will become the first female CEO of a Swiss watch brand.
I think that she was hired by AI.
Great.
The first AI CEO.
Yeah. No, she's not AI. I'm sure it's a real person, and we'll meet her.
It's a real person.
I'm sure she's lovely. I think she was hired by. I think there was like a list of parameters they wanted. They're like, country of origin options, gender, backgrounds, and personality attributes, and they put into a system. And I think the system
just Marvel movies.
Spit back a bunch of results and just give a percentage score. And then they just went through the list and be like, would you be willing to take this job? Our computer system thinks you'd be great for it. And then I'm probably wrong, but this is my theory.
It's a good theory.
Yeah.
Now, this is, I think it's Ilaria Resta, who is Swiss-Italian, and his background is basically at Procter & Gamble, those well-known watch manufacturers. Are we just being snobs? Are we fundamentally just being snobs and don't like the idea that someone who used to be in charge of Pantene and Head & Shoulders, getting rid of your dandruff, is now in charge of a watch brand that we all like?
Well, let's think about cosmetics. Cosmetics is the idea that people buy something that they put on themselves to make them feel better about themselves. And that's basically an Audemars Piguet. So I think that, like, the thinking is correct. It's the psychology of how are they supposed to expect it to feel when they learn about the product, when they buy it, when they wear it, when they see it on others. We know that Audemars Piguet has not been making watches to satisfy watch enthusiasts strictly. They make cool watches, no doubt. They're great, but the pricing and the complications they come out with and things like that, like, you can tell that there's a very specific kind of demographic that they're trying to serve, which isn't a direct overlap with, like, the traditional watch enthusiast. So they're trying to hire someone who is an experienced curator, and the AI powers that be have probably decided that this person is the best qualified to manage and foster that experience. Because remember, they're selling directly. Like, you don't go to an authorized dealer to buy an Audemars Piguet. This is a vertically integrated Disney style thing where they make the movie that gets you excited by the watch, and then they tease you a little bit about it, and they tell you how awesome you're going to feel by spending all this money, and hopefully you'll do it. Like, this is a whole experience they're trying to build. This is worlds different than the Audemars Piguet of yesterday.
So the newly named AI Piguet, David, what do we think of this particular move? Her background is what she declared herself as brand building. Can you build a brand further like AP when you are limited in the amount of product you can actually produce. She comes from a background whereby if you can sell more stuff, you make more Duracell batteries. Like, if you do a lot of advertising and people would rather buy Duracell than Everready, then you can just go and make some more batteries or some more Ariel or Herbal Essence or whatever. But if you build the brand further for AI Piguet, then what do you do? Because you can't just suddenly magic another 50,000 watches into existence.
Well, there's only one way to build AP, and it's upwards basically. It's one watch away from being not in existence at all. It's a one watch brand, so
Okay,
you can
enough.
only build on it. Whether or not that's successful will remains to be seen. I don't think where you've been or what you've been doing in terms of which industry you've been a CEO of. I really don't think that matters too much, because AP is such a unique thing unto its own in the world of watches. You could be a watch CEO and you could still do a terrible job if you got the AP CEO role. So it's not like there are a bunch of other people who are better qualified just because they've been running a watch brand to run AP now. So it's a tricky situation. I wonder what her take on it will be, and clearly this rebranding, or this expansion, I should say, because it's not a rebranding, this expansion with the Code 1159 is yet to work out, to put it mildly. We'll have to see where that goes. And again, it's a tricky brand because it's something that people around the world have agreed to wear to show their status, and it's a few tens of thousands of people every year. So it's not like millions or hundreds of thousands or something like that, and it's not something that people, even kids, know from Mumbai to Montana, just like Ferrari or whatever else, or Rolex or something like that. No, it's like a very nouveau riche product purchased by people who want to say that, okay, I've made it and I'm here and I'm rich and whatever. So where do you take that? How do you turn it into something that lives on and lives beyond this craze that's existed for the last number of years? And don't get me wrong, the Royal Oak is fantastic, but there's still a lot to be done.
Let's remember that Audemars Piguet is controlled by a board. There's a group of people that have been there a long time, family members included, who basically make the decisions for everything from marketing spend to product decisions. The person running the company is a leader, a spokesperson, an executor. This isn't going to be someone who has ultimate control over whether or not they make new collections, they make new designs. So I think we need to understand the parameters of this job. If we're expecting someone to come in and be able to change the look and feel of Audemars Piguet watches, no one CEO is capable of doing that given the management structure there. So it's bigger than that. Maybe they can come in and influence, and of course they're going to have to give input as to what they think new watches should look like, but from a design or brand shape perspective, they don't have a huge amount of authority.
But is that a complete change, though, from the previous management of Francois Henri? I mean, I got the impression that he was pretty much, he'd been there 30 years. If he decided that he wanted to have some groupthink to design the Code 1159, then he was in charge of that, and there wasn't much the board were going to step in to do about it.
Again, I haven't seen the governing documents, but I'm pretty sure that they make these sort of joint decisions about this. I don't think that he was sort of like other managers, a product person. So the amount of products he put before them to present to them might have been limited. He might have not had a lot of passion to do it. They may have said to him, hey, we want to have more watches. What can you come up with? And he may have not been particularly speedy about it. So there's a lot of things that we're not sure of, but we know that he wasn't passionate like some other CEOs, like maybe, Jean-Claude Biver, about making new watches. He had other things that he was passionate about: relationships, branding, the brand experience, retail. I mean, he came from retail, so the things around retail and that experience were much more near and dear to his heart. And that's where he made the most changes to the company, right? Was the things that he cared about. With watches, less so, and he relied upon others, I guess.
So do we think this is going to be a continuation of what Francois Henri developed over the last 30 years, as opposed to someone that's coming in to bring some brand new ideas and change direction and put their own stamp on it? Is this a hand at a steady rudder type appointment?
I really don't know. I know that the previous CEO does not have shoes that are easily filled because he's sort of a character, and I don't know that he could sort of write a detailed description of a strategy. You can't replace the way he speaks. You can't replace his relationships that he's developed with people for a long time. So it really necessarily has to be a reset. I think that they're going to maintain the model where they have their own stores, and I think they're going to maintain the focus on the Royal Oak. And I think that for the first few years, it's going to look a lot the same. I really don't see this being a dramatic a difference. And again, this is a figurehead for the first several years of their job, at the very least.
Yes, it must take a long time to get your established as to how it all works. Well, best of wishes to Ilaria Resta as she undertakes her new job. I'm sure it will certainly be a change of scenery from Procter & Gamble.
Hi, I'm Ariel Adams, founder of aBlogtoWatch, with a message from eBay, a platform I probably use daily. Make sure your watches are the real deal with eBay Authenticity Guarantee. I believe it's the first and best service of its kind that protects your luxury purchases and checks each watch individually at eBay's highly reputable authentication partner, Stolen Company, in the United States. From band to bezel, their authenticators ensure each wristwatch matches the eBay listing and is the real deal. Authenticity Guarantee is also very fast. Once authentication is complete, your watch is securely delivered via rapid 2-day shipping. Surprisingly, eBay's Authenticity Guarantee service is free for all watches priced $2,000 and up. No one should buy a luxury item without an Authenticity Guarantee. Do what I do and check eBay before each watch purchase, because everyone deserves real.
Let's talk about a watch and an event that you were at, Ariel. Actually, 2 watches and 2 events. Let's talk first of all about the new Clive Cussler Doxa. Now, it's not telling any secrets out of school that you're not really that familiar with the Clive Cussler universe as everything now gets described. Do you feel slightly more attuned to all things Clive Cussler now that you've met his son and been to his event and his watch launch?
I mean, slightly for sure. I was very honest. We did an hour-long interview with his son and then a little bit of time with Jan Edox, who runs Doxa, and I sat down with him. His name is Dirk. Oddly, I learned that the character in the book was named after the actual human, which was nice. It would have been very odd if somebody named their son after a character they created in a book, which is like, am I the second version?
Was it that way around? I didn't know that.
Yeah, boy came first, then character in the book. Yeah, so I learned certain things. I don't know that, I would necessarily relate in a lot of ways to the Dirk Pitts character. He was sort of a Luddite. Clive Cussler was one of those classic car lovers, and that was his son Dirk is. And apparently the character in the book would always find to do like a high-speed getaway in like a 1940s car, which again sounds like the worst thing in the world. So I think that there's a demographic for this type of character who is, from a little bit of a different time, more of an analog era. There's a lot of, underwater diving, shipwreck searches and things like that. And so we talked a lot about that because, the family was involved in that. And, we talked about diving a lot in general. So we had a really great conversation. I'm definitely going to read some of the books. He gave me his latest book. He signed it, which is really nice. And the watch is, not the Doxa you thought you were going to see. I mean, this is a very left field type of watch. The dial, I think, is really nice, and it has, I don't want to say old-timey, but sort of a compass rose style dial, which I've always thought would look good on watch dials before. Not the first time it's been done, but probably the first time on a Doxa. But it looks like, it's supposed to look like found treasure. I mean, the way that Jan Edox explained it to me is you're supposed to have like, dived in a sunken ship and found this watch. I'm like, oh, this is cool. The watch is supposed to look beat up. And so they tumbled it, the steel case, in a machine. You have to tumble the case and the bracelet and the bezel and stuff like separately. And it looks, it's supposed to look aged. It's a pre-aged watch, which is funny because people sometimes make fun of this in the conservative circles. I did this with Laka. We were designing the Radox, which is pre-aged. And I think this stuff looks really, really cool. There's a lot of different ways of doing it. This is one way. And now you have what I've always thought was a very conservative brand, Doxa, doing this with probably their landmark marketing story, which is the Clive Cussler relationship. And I know it's cool. It validates a lot of what I've liked for a long time. So it's definitely one of the weirder ones, but it's satisfying. It's a really neat watch.
David, Doxa fan?
Not really, to be honest. There's a lot of Doxas around here because they won a contract with the how do you say, like the train transportation field like 100 years ago. So a lot of people here still have a bunch of like oversized Doxa pocket watches, and they have full memories. So it's technically synonymous with a Swiss watch, but it's been a bit all over the place, that brand, for the last good number of years. But yeah, I do like some of their designs.
Cool. I think that's quite smart. I'm not sure I'd buy it, but I can certainly appreciate it. I interviewed Jan Edox as well. You can see that interview on the website, and he does describe the trouble that they had trying to get the bracelet wearing to match the watch case wearing. So it's clearly been a bit of a challenge, and you can tell from speaking to them that the whole Clive Cussler thing really is a labour of love. It's just something they feel really passionately about, this relationship that kind of put them on the map in the States and in Western Europe in terms of all things Clive Cussler that they're very keen on. But it wasn't the only event, and it wasn't the only watch you were present. Also with a sea theme, and that was Ulysse Nardin and the Ocean Race. What I knew as the Volvo Ocean Race, because I was involved in all things Volvo in the past. But what did you make of the new UN and all the pretty yachts that were around Ariel?
So the Ocean Race, which is, I don't know, like the second most important sailing race around the world next to the America's Cup, and sponsored by Ulysse Nardin as the official timekeeping partner, is a really cool thing. You know, and I sailing is one of those weird sports where you really got to be there and talk to everyone and then see it happening and then learn a lot about it to understand why it's cool, why it's competitive, what's hard about it, especially as a spectator from the shore. If, you know, there's sort of a sailing competition going on, you're just watching, like, oh, look at the little pretty boats, you know, moving out there. Like, you don't really know what's going on because it's so far away. But the technology for boats is fascinating. They keep making better and better boats. And I mean, I don't know how many thousands of years humans have been making and improving boats. I love that anywhere where there's a machine that we keep improving. And this particular race, they have to build the boat, you know, basically from the ground up. And they're all a little bit different in a lot of ways. They even have different shapes and things like that. Yeah, they're mono hulls, of course, but they have different shapes. And it's just, it's a really interesting, you know, long race. They do crazy things where they train for, you know, like over a month on end. So the way sort of I understood it's sort of similar to being in a space station where, yes, you have gravity, but you're in this really uncomfortable environment for a long time, having a weird routine each day, in close proximity with others, not a lot of comforts. So it's psychologically and physically difficult, and there's also that human element, which is interesting to a lot of people. I like the boats themselves, the materials they're made out of, and Ulysse Nardin for many years has sponsored a variety of boating things, whether it's just being like a watch to wear while in your yacht to supporting boat races and things like that, or special kinds of boats. So it's really cool to be there. The watch is the Ocean Race version, or this year's Ocean Race version of the diver's chronograph. It's black with this carbonium. I like that. It makes me smile to say that name, carbonium bezel. You know, great chronograph movement. I think that this watch case concept, which has been out for a few years now, is maturing nicely. It's simple, but it's handsome. It's not too big. Again, it has a good automatic movement. So it's a cool thing, and if you understand the Ocean Race, it's even neater. I want more opportunities to sail. Like how I come away from these things. Like, I want to be on the water more doing that.
Well, you can come over for Scotland. We can take you in a boat any time. David, you might not be a Doxa fan, but I do know you're an Ulysse Nardin fan. What do you make of this? This is not a freak. Ulysse Nardin in shock, non-freak watch launch.
Yes, I like all things Ulysse Nardin, to be honest. I'm not saying they can't make any mistakes, but I do like the fact that they have a good number of collections, and every once in a while they narrow it, they trim it down, and then they build it. They just can't help themselves. And there's another yachting watch, and then another chronograph with an in-house movement, and this and that. So I like the dynamism of the brand, and it's just such a small, agile company that can enjoy and live its creativity. Yeah, it's all kinds of pluses for me when it comes to Ulysse Nardin, so I freaking love it. This is not the UN I would buy. I think it's a bit too large to my eyes. The sub-discs are a bit too close together, but maybe that's just me. But I do like carbonium, and I like a light watch. And this looks like exactly the kind of watch that looks good on a boat when it's raining and, you know, water is splashing into your face and you're being sliced up by, you know, like sharp ropes and whatever flying all around you. So it sounds like the watch would survive longer than I would on a yacht. That's for sure.
David bringing his vast yachting experience to describing sharp ropes.
PTSD from like whatever high performance sailing boat.
Good stuff. Yeah, I actually, the observation you've made is the observation I would make. The subdials just look not quite in the right place.
Not when you hold the watch. When you handle the watch, I don't think so.
It looks okay.
Yeah, I was wearing the watch a lot, and I didn't see any of that. I don't think anybody mentioned anything like that. So this happens sometimes. You know, you see a picture and you can come to the wrong conclusion. But I think that you have to see this and pretty much every watch in person to come to these final conclusions.
So we're just blaming your photography. Is that it?
My photography?
Who took the photos?
I think it's because there's those like circles within circles, and if you took those out, it would look totally fine. But it it creates this visual illusion that the two main ones are like closer to the center than they actually are.
Right, okay, cool. What do you call this feature? You have it on Ulysse Nardin and some others. So they've got the ocean race written on this kind of end of the rubber strap. Bulgari have a similar sort of thing on the, obviously, the Bulgari, as I like to call it. I don't know what it was called from last week. What do you call that bit? Has that got a name?
Yeah, it's a link.
Do you know the bit I mean?
It's a link.
It feels like it should have a more dedicated name than just a link.
You want to come up with one? Come up with a cute name for it.
I think we need to come up with a cute. If anyone's got any suggestions of cute names, then do message in.
We should come up with a cool name for that. It's true.
Well, it leads us nicely on. Just mention the Bulgari. We put a poll in the field last week. The question was, when you think Bulgari, what do you first think of? The options were fashion brand, lifestyle brand, or watch brand. And the results are in, and they're completely inconclusive.
Oh my gosh.
Fashion brand, 40%. Lifestyle brand, 20%. Watch brand, 40%. So I think that means that me and David win, because I said fashion brand, he said watch brand. I think, Ariel, you called it a lifestyle brand. So the only conclusion of this very limited poll is that you're not right, but not that we are. I think is probably the only conclusion.
Wow, compelling. Compelling information there.
Compelling statistics there. So if you've got an idea for what you should call this little link that these watches have, then we're all ears. And anything else you want to ask the show, email podcast@aBlogtoWatch.com. Ariel, you reviewed a rather unique, probably not quite right, but I suppose it's uniquely powered, a smartwatch that uses some mechanical wizardry to keep its battery going. Something which seems, from the world of cycling and dynamos, like a kind of obvious solution. Why is this not something that everybody is adapting? This is the Sequent Elektron SuperCharger smartwatch.
This is sort of the next generation of hybrid watches. See, when the smartwatch first came out, we saw a lot of this type of hybrid thing. And I don't really know what else to call it. It's like a hybrid between a traditional watch and a smartwatch. And it came in a lot of different flavors. These were not particularly satisfying products. They were created because there was a clear concern with a lot of consumers. Oh, I like the smartwatch stuff, but I like the looks of the traditional watch. And that was true. And so various designers tried to come up with these sort of in-betweens. And from mostly technological standpoint, these were never very satisfying. A couple of years later, I think that companies are ready to try again, and Sequent is one of them. And what they've done is they've come up with a smartwatch which is a relatively simple machine in the sense it's not trying to just pack itself with features. It does a few things and does them, pretty okay. And it's built on sort of the philosophy of design and aesthetics and form and function that traditional watches are based on. So it's sort of like if you if you like traditional watches, you want like sort of an entrance into sort of more modern watches, this is a really cool way of doing it emotionally and psychologically. And the watches are cool. They're well made and they're not priced too high. The one that I wore mostly was produced from titanium with a sapphire crystal and, attractive dial. And it was like just under $850. And I think that it goes up a little bit more, close to $900 with a DLC coated case. And it begins with a movement that has a rotor, but rather than winding a mainspring, it generates electricity through an electromagnetic generator, and that electricity feeds a battery, which powers a relatively simple quartz mechanism. It has Bluetooth, so it updates the time and can send data that the onboard sensors collect to software on your phone. And on board, it has a heart rate monitor and a blood oxygen meter, and it, I think an accelerometer for steps and things like that. And so it's an activity tracker combined with traditional watch that powers itself. You're able to put it in a docking station, but unless you're doing a lot of complicated stuff and tracking your workout regularly, I actually was able to get away with just wearing it as an automatic. And that's really what intrigued me, is it wasn't that the electricity generating system was gimmicky, but that it worked very, very well. Now, yes, Seiko Kinetic has been in this space for a long time, but the Seiko Kinetic concept has never been adapted to anything modern. In fact, Seiko seems to have more or less abandoned everything related to sort of cool high-end quartz watches they used to, the Kinetic and the Direct Drive, and they had all this kind of crazy stuff. They're just, other than Grand Seiko, they don't seem to have any interest in really high-end quartz right now. So yes, this is not the first time, but I think that this system produces more electricity. It's larger, but I think it produces more electricity than the Seiko Kinetic and the system aboard the Sequent needs to. So this is not the first generation product from Sequent, which is why I sort of was more excited to review it, because I don't really like reviewing first generation stuff from technology companies, electronics companies, because it inherently is going to get better. But this was well done. This was fun. There's room for them to improve and add more features for sure. I think it's really about that, adding more features. And I talk about that in the review. But I was genuinely excited by this. And again, it's going to be a niche product, but I think that this is something that traditional watch lovers can get a lot more excited about than they may have been able to in a traditional smartwatch.
We spoke briefly last week about the future merging of technologies, and I do wonder whether it's just waiting for somebody in the mechanical watch world that uses an automatic movement to just add the little bit that makes the Sequent watch produce power for a battery that gives you Bluetooth connectivity. And that if you were to add that to your Zenith so that it would always set the time to be the right time, that wouldn't be the ultimate coming together of mechanical.
Well, Resonance did that, or tried to.
Yes, but I think their price point and what they tried to do was possibly the inhibiting factor. Here's an organization that's managing to do more than just connect to Bluetooth for a few $100s. So you've got to assume that the cost of the actual unit that does the Bluetooth bit, the battery charging, and the rotor is a couple $100 at the absolute most. If somebody could just add that, I can kind of imagine a brand like Frederic Constant or somebody like that going, if we were just to add or Longines, somebody like this.
Here's the problem. The problem is this: they could, and they will, and eventually they'll find it. But from the business perspective, none of this makes any sense, because we're not actually improving technology. I mean, you are, but you're sort of like adding a flavor rather than inventing a new meal, if you know what I mean. And it's unclear what the market wants. Usually when you make a new machine, it's like, well, we're making it because this segment of the market would buy something like this because they're not being served and the other products aren't really quite for them. So there's like a business case for it. Here it's like, well, we're looking for the right product that makes people happy and smile and wear it all the time. Like, nobody knows what that is. So they're just hoping that someone figures out a formula or a template or some type of a platform that people like, and then people will be happy to invest in it and build on it. But, finding these platforms you can build on in the watch space has been very difficult. The automatic movement was such a platform. There was this sort of like agreed upon shape and way it worked. And it was like, okay, everyone, this is great. Let's build a whole industry around it. And that's what they did. But finding new platforms, people are hesitant because if you invest in the wrong thing and another platform comes around, you feel really foolish.
David, Ariel touched on a thing there of asking the question or positing the problem of, well, what does the market actually want? You have reviewed a watch, the Charles Zuber Perfos watch designed by Eric Giroud. This seems to me to be an organization that sat down and gone, what does the market want? It wants this. And then they've set across to design it. What did you make of this Charles Zuber? They were at Charles Zuber were at Watches and Wonders, weren't they?
Yeah, I think they were there. Not at Watches and Wonders, but just outside. I think they were at
No, they were at Watches and Wonders.
No,
they were there.
They were in the Carre. Yeah, they were.
I went to visit them and everything.
I saw them at the Border Watch. That's why I said okay. That's where I said hello. That's
They're
funny.
everywhere.
Yeah. No, you're dead right. They were in two places.
Yeah, taking over Geneva. Just as you said, I think it's clear. But it's I don't think it's fair to put it on Charles Zuber that they are the only ones doing it. There's basically all the big brands and middle-sized brands and small brands are doing it. It's an integrated bracelet with an angular bezel, and it's just the same thing over and over again. But at least we can say that this one looks unique and recognizable. It's very difficult to confuse this one with anything else, and that I will applaud. And I also like that it's thin. It's not not as bulky as some of the others in the competition. There are some really nice and really neat details, and of course some others that they need to refine. But the one that I had in for review was an early prototype, so I cut them some slack, and I mentioned this in the review that it's these things are supposed to be improved here and there, but again we are talking about small details. I like the bespoke movement, which is also very cool, by Olivier Maury. You might know him from some other brands, and it's a cool little movement. Again, bespoke design, micro rotor, all the rest of it, and prices are, they range from 7,900 all the way to 24,500, and the one I reviewed was 22,800. So it's a costly watch, low production, with some really nice details here and there.
Yeah, it was interesting that they're producing it in these different sizes, 36, 39, 42, and the cost differentials between them. Obviously, different materials, I assume, between the sizes. Do you think that this is a design language that they're pushing into? Is this what we're going to associate Charles Zuber with? It's certainly cool. I like the look of it.
Sure. I mean, once they spend all this money and they have Eric Giroud design it, then you have to stick to this and just introduce refinements. But I think they have established their design for now.
Finally, I think we will have a chat about probably the biggest release of the week? Maybe the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra. Whether it was the biggest release of the week or not, it's one of my favourites. I'm a big fan of this Worldtimer with the laser ablated map of the world on it. Was this anything to write home about for either of you gentlemen?
All you. I got another meeting soon.
Ariel is like, yeah, whatever. I've got somewhere else to be rather than talk about this watch.
I mean, people will buy this. Look, Omega has a very different attitude when they release stuff that they know watch lovers are going to be into, and ones are like, oh yeah, I know this is like, made for watch lovers like the rest of our stuff, but we know you guys aren't really asking for this. I mean, this is fine. Some people are going to be like, oh, I'm so happy they made this, but they're not inventing anything new here. It's, oh, you like the earth on the dial. Oh, you like this. Oh, green's hot. This is the totally made by committee type of thing. Doesn't have a lot of soul to it. I mean, this is like kind of designed the way that watches were designed, like on Matrixes, 20 years ago, in a way that we all made fun of. It's fine. I feel nothing here.
So we have an AI CEO appointment and we have an AI designed watch. Is that what we're saying?
I mean, like again, this is like designed to appeal to like a market position. Like I don't think that this is like somebody be like, guys, I woke up from a dream. I had this idea for a watch. We got to do this. Like no one asked for this to exist. Is my point.
Well, at least I suppose on the plus side, you've probably saved me from spending 10,000 euros on a watch by putting me off. David, hot or not?
I think it's pretty cool. I think it's gonna be well received.
Ringing endorsement will be well received.
I will disagree with Ariel here. I think people will go crazy for this. Honestly, it's a great looking watch. It looks a complete whole for once. I think it's gonna do really well, and it's not like 15 grand or 18 or some preposterous amount. It's 9.4 and 9.6, and if you want it in titanium, then it's 10,000 on it. It's not cheap by any stretch of the imagination, but I think for once it looks pretty cool. But their official images were really quite bad.
Why do people still consider this a luxury complication? This complication has been built for literally 100 years. You can make it in the cheapest way possible. It's like the most basic set of gears. I think that's what bothers me is like, stop pretending that this is high end. I know you want to sell high end watches, Omega. I fully support that. But like, why can't you be like Frederic Constant? Be like, oh, look, it's our Worldtimer for $3,000. Like that this is $10,000 just seems unnecessary to me.
I think, David, we've discovered that the way to get Ariel to go for the quick hot take is to put him under pressure that he's got another meeting to go to.
I'm dedicated to my job as a commentator, Rick.
Excellent. Well, we're enjoying that commentary. Good stuff. Well, that is us for this week. Go check out the Omega review. Give us your opinion as to whether this is just a nonsense product from Omega that really shouldn't be priced the way that it's priced, and it's not a luxury product, I think is what Ariel's saying. Not a luxury movement. There we go. Ariel, where can we find you in this coming week?
I'll actually be at home, but you can read my articles on aBlogtoWatch.com, updates on Instagram at ArielToWatch, this podcast, and the Superlative podcast.
Good stuff. David, what are you up to?
It's aBTW_David on Instagram and aBlogtoWatch.com. More hands-ons, more reviews coming in. Stay tuned for that.
Excellent. Well, thank you for listening. You follow me at Rick TikTok and Instagram. And tune in again next week. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Catch you guys next week. Bye-bye.